This planning commission is called to order this Wednesday, November 17th. Have a roll call, please. Here.
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 Commissioner Williams.
Here. Here.
All right, may I have an adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
We will not have any adoption of the minutes because they will be next month. Are there any, well, I guess I need to, public comments? Every member of the public who is recognized to speak shall address the chairman, and in speaking, avoid disrespect to the board, town staff, and other members of the meeting. State your name and address when speaking. For the record, comments are limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any public comment that is here? Nope. Okay, well, we'll wait till then. We don't have any old business, so we'll move on to new business. The Unified Development Ordinance Amendment, it's a public hearing, so I need to have a motion to enter into public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Guess we don't have any public comment, but first call for public comment. Second call for public comment. Third and final call for public comment. None, so we will close the public hearing. Kevin?
Yes. All right. Great. Give me 1 second. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Denmark. So we're here this evening for some Unified Development Ordinance edits related to signs. As you know, we actually just came through a couple months ago and did some changes to the signs, but we actually have some housekeeping items that we inadvertently took off of the previous code and found out that we had problems with that, and then are bringing it back to you to make sure that we can get this taken care of. So this is more high level, so I'm happy to go through any specific comments you have about any of these, but and just please let me know. So the first one, so section 513, this is dealing with signage outside of the historic district, and it's regulated by the Unified Development Ordinance. So signage that's in a PUD is regulated separately, so just take that into consideration as you're reviewing this. So the first one was dealing with suspended signs, is to clarify the exempt suspended signs that are smaller. These are signs that are, if you have a walkway and you have like a colonnade, and these are the signs that are perpendicular to the doorway, meant to be very small, just identifiable signs, as opposed to the suspended signs that are more for the advertising purposes along the front of the building. So we just clarified that, dealing with the height requirement to make sure that any of these type of signs, that there was clearance of 8 feet, so that way no one would hit their head on it. And then we also have various changes to the permanent building signs, which is adding that suspended signs to the building types, removing some of the dimensional standards for more flexibility, and then clarifying how a canopy signage can be placed below the canopy and some minor formatting. Additional to that, we're adding non-digital electronic scrolling signs, and this is mainly for the fuel stations. That way, kind of right now what we have is like you have to manually, we have designs where you have to manually go out and change each and every letter. What this does is it allows for gas companies to be able to electronically change the sign, and so literally it's a little scroll in there that will rotate around the numbers, and they just rotate the numbers around. So it's not an electric sign in the essence of like an LED lighting, but it's electronic in the sense of that it's a mechanical movement of the letters. For the historic district, we're dealing with external lighting. So as the amendment to returns the ability to have the reverse channel or the halo lighting types of signage. that's not internally lit, but rather the reverse channel. Other items is dealing with the amendment to returns the ability of the UDO administrator to approve other sign types not specifically provided that do not exceed 5 square feet. 5 square feet is not a lot. It's about this big. So the changeable copy, which is the allow for that manual changeable copy in the historic district, and then the suspended signs as well. Again, the suspended signs for the building sign types, the dimensional standards that we talked about, instead of having it specifically say a 3 by 2 sign, it would just say 15 square feet. It gives the flexibility for them to be able to change the design of the sign. And then for the canopies, what we're doing is in the for a gas canopy. What this means is that the allotted square footage that you have for your wall signage, you can use up to 30% of that towards a canopy sign. And we actually have a canopy right now that has been submitted for a sign permit that we unfortunately we can't approve the sign permit because we inadvertently changed the documents, and now we're coming back to you. So. Some of the revised definitions dealing with the projecting signs from the current definition to what you see here. The review criteria, it meets all of these review criteria. I'm happy to go through them if you have any questions about it. This evening, your action is to recommend the approval, recommend with any amendments, or to recommend denial of that. From a step process, the first step here, this will go to Town Council at their December meeting, and then for a final in January. Proposed motion here for you, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, Kevin?
Yeah.
Just question, again, new guy question. Is this something that we should have caught when you did this? I mean, you said the inadvertent changes, like we made some changes and we omitted some things. How is that supposed to have been caught?
Sometimes, I mean, just when you're doing the text and you have situations that come up, then you don't even realize it until after the fact that what we did was we inadvertently changed that code that now has taken out what we were previously doing. So it's not what we like to have happened. It's something that we should have caught, and that's why we're realizing our mistake, and then we're bringing it back in front of you to make sure that we're capturing it so these individuals can move forward with these signs. No such thing as a perfect ordinance.
This happens when you're making changes to large sections of code.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I got a few questions. On the suspended sign, I'm trying to understand what that means. One, I'm a little concerned when it says non-street facing sign in the new verbiage. Part of the reason I say that, and the way you've just described it, the suspended sign, it causes me even more question of what I'm really supposed to be considering a suspended sign. Like my office, there's a sign. Well, portion of our office actually faces the major thoroughfare, and a portion is suspended, not facing the major thoroughfare. But if the configuration of the building had been slightly different, I could see us having a suspended sign facing the street, even though it's not a street sign of sorts. And so but it is suspended. So when you say, I'm just trying to understand what suspended sign is in yours. Is it like intended to be, this is the entrance, this is
Yes.
back room?
It
These are
is literally
small, sign.
Very small signs that are about, this big. It's more for under the walkway as you're walking. You're walking under a colonnade, and you have multiple businesses that instead of you have to walk out and look to see what the sign.
Like the promenade has them all over.
Yes.
Okay, or like Tanger Outlet underneath, kind of thing. When you're underneath, you can't
Yes,
see it.
exactly. And it's not a. It is. Those types of signs are meant more for the pedestrian as opposed to for someone that's in a vehicle, yes. So the suspended signs that regulate your signage, like your wall signage, that's parallel with the wall and faces out.
Right.
And that's your larger signs that are meant for people to be able to see from further away. These small suspended signs that we have are very small. I mean, they might be, 3-4 square feet, if that, and meant for, as you're walking along the sidewalk, you then have the ability to see what business it is. But if you were in a car, you wouldn't see it because it's perpendicular, so.
And is suspended sign further defined in the UDO? So that it would explain that I'm a little concerned with the non-street facing sign, because if it happens to face a street, somebody might get confused in reading it. I'm just wanting to make sure that there's no confusing language in here.
Well, then that's a wall sign. That goes towards their classification of a wall sign.
Okay. All right. Is the specific wording about the electronic scroll signage, that's a definition, because you've obviously shown us an example of what that is. Is that something that when you go to look at what electronic scroll sign is, like if I Google electronic scroll sign, that's going to be the image that reliably pops up, and there's not going to be a source of confusion about what an electronic scroll sign is?
There's no confusion. Yeah.
And it's not a debatable point of this could be anything else. It could never be construed as an electronic sign in any way.
No, this is a standard practice for gas signs.
Okay.
And Jason, you probably nod your head as well, where you have it manually changed, where you literally have to go out and manually change each and every one every single time.
Right.
You have this design where literally it's a scroll, and it's all wound up, and then there's a motor that will unwind it and literally rotate the letter or the numbers over to be able to change the numbers. And you can see like this is not
Digital, it's not lighted.
Yeah, it's not digital. It's not a digital sign, which is not allowed.
And are these going to be allowed both in Old Town and in Bluffton at large?
Yes. Yeah. And again, that's why, remember, it's just what's regulated by the Unified Development Ordinance. So if you think up on Bluffton Parkway, that's in the Schultz tract. So that has different sign regulations.
Right, I understand that, yeah. There was a couple of these that changes where like the projecting sign increased in size from 9 square feet total to 15 square feet. And then there was another one, I think, again, projecting sign, but I think this may be into the Old Town or in the Historic District, that increased from 5 square feet to 10 square feet in sign area maximum.
Yeah, and can you point out which section you're referring to, please?
5.15, the Old Town.
Yeah, there's 5.
At the end, the
Yeah.
9, 4B. Yeah.
It's projecting sign both, it looks like, in the Old Town area and then maybe at large area. I'm trying to.
It's the same verbiage, I believe. One's 15 square.
Yeah, one's 5.13.6.B.5 in Roman numerals, and then the other one's the 5.15.6.Q.4.B.5. And then it's just both of them are increased in square footage, and I didn't know what the thought process was behind increasing those sign display areas. Are you tracking where I'm at? Are you still looking for that?
No, I see right here. I can look into that one and make sure before we get it to first reading to town council.
Okay.
Just to address that.
The other comment that I had was regarding 5.15.6.Q.1 in the Old Town Historic District, where you're trying to address the halo lighting signage and provide options for the UDO administrator to review. One of the things you eliminated was that the E.I, which included illumination of signs permitted only with external light sources, yada, yada, which I understand trying to create a place where you could have halo lighting. But one of the things that does is it precludes people from having that specific
Sorry,
statement.
where are you?
Under the Old Town Historic District, under the proposed changes, that first one listed under lighting, where you're trying to address the halo lighting.
Okay.
So you've got E, lighting shall comply with the section listed below, and then it gives two additional points, point I and then II. The first one basically eliminates, that's what really precludes the halo lighting from existing, because it's saying it has to be an externally lighted source. But one of the things that statement also does is if it is an externally lighted source, it would mean that it has to, that it would also have to be shielded to minimize glare to the street, sidewalks, and adjacent properties. Bare bulb illumination is not permitted. So I'm not saying that there should, I'm saying you could keep a portion of that just to make sure that if it is an externally lighted sign, that there's not a bare bulb exposed and that that it's set up in a way where there's no glare. Because if you eliminate that whole statement, then then it would permit you to light up a sign externally where it still might impact drivers' visibility. Does that make sense?
I mean, if you want to put that as part of the condition to move forward as a recommendation, and then we can look into that.
Okay.
What does that section 5.12, does that include any?
I don't have that in front of me, and I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Since that was a general, if that covered what she was talking about or not.
Yeah, and if it's somewhere else, then I don't worry about it having to be also here. I just want to make sure that those external lighting sources aren't impacting traffic and pedestrians.
Okay, anybody else? Questions? Entertain a motion?
A motion to approve the sign ordinance with the condition that staff review the projecting sign maximum display areas and review the ordinance to ensure that external lighting sources do not, or are prevented from creating glare for the pedestrian or vehicular viewpoint.
Second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next up is the Goethe Road rezoning request. This is a public hearing as well, so may I have a motion to enter public hearing?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Do you have any public comment that we know of that's here? First call for public comment, second call for public comment, third and final call for public comment. We are now closing the public hearing portion. Kevin, would you like to?
So as you said, we're here for a rezoning request of the two parcels that are owned by Mr. J.C. Frazier Jr., who is in attendance this evening, from residential general to neighborhood core. Technically, there are 4 addresses on there. I don't want anyone to be confused that there's 4 properties. It's just 4 addresses on two properties. So it's the 2 tax ID numbers that are listed on the screen here, and this will be regulated by the Unified Development Ordinance. So in October of this year, Mr. Frazier submitted the application for the request. We had a workshop on November 1st, 10th?
Whatever that was after.
I believe that was on the
That was on
1st.
It was on the first.
That was
before
on the
we stayed
first.
late.
Yes.
Monday.
That was the one that we stayed late for, yes. So that was the workshop that we got through and provided a timeline for you. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. However, it's a very extensive timeline of Mr. Frazier of having this property, his father having the property, constructing a commercial structure of 1,500 square foot, operating a restaurant at that location. Property was, when the town enacted zoning, that the property was then zoned for a residential use, and then had issues dealing with the status of that. At one point, that the town council did approve a rezoning request in 1993 for the properties to be zoned a mixed use 2, which is MU2 at the time. That was the zoning classifications that were and then in 2001, 2002, the town of Bluffton rezoned the property to general residential, along with numerous properties that were part of the annexation of the Goethe-Schultz Road. And then at this point, town determined that the owner had vested rights at that time to continue. However, he'd lost those vested rights for not opening the restaurant again in 2016, where we stated that he had lost those vested rights. And then back in September, we met with Mr. Frazier on site for our pre-application meeting. He submitted his application the next day, and then we held our workshop on the 1st. Just so you know that all of the property owners within 250 feet were noticed. We placed an ad in the island packet on October 17th, and that there's been a sign, a rezoning sign installed in front of Mr. Frazier's properties since that time. I did have a phone call with Mr. Serrano. He is the property owner right next door to Mr. Frazier. And as you can see on here, the statement that I received, he had no objections to the request, and he wished Mr. Frazier all the best of luck with the rezoning. We do have numerous review criteria. Hopefully everyone had an opportunity to read through those, justifying this amendment. I'm happy to go through any one of them if you like, but from a staff's perspective, that they were all favorable. From a process standpoint, this evening we are here for the public hearing and the recommendation to town council. And next step is that this would go in front of town council at their December 14th meeting with another public hearing and final reading in January of this year, or excuse me, of next year. So this evening, your actions are to recommend approval of the application, recommend approval with amendments, or to recommend denial of the application. Mr. Frazier is here in case you have any additional questions. He can answer them, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have as well.
Thank you. Mr. Frazier, did you want to say anything or just wait for questions? You're okay? Okay. Wants to start? Matt, any questions? You good? Charlie, or you want to wait?
One question, or to start with at least. On the agenda, it says to rezone 2 parcels from residential general to neighborhood core. I thought it was 1 parcel.
It's two parcels. You might have seen 1 or 2 images that I provided where I just kind of like blocked out. You can see here, I had these just kind of sitting in the background in case you had any questions. Here's one example where the red line is just me highlighting the 2 properties. There's 2 parcels right there. Again, this one, I had no parcel lines shown on here, so I just did it as a 1, just to kind of give you the context of where it's located. But again, at the very beginning of it, in the report, 2 tax ID numbers. So those are the 2 parcels.
Okay.
It's easier to always reference the tax ID number as opposed to an address, because addresses always change.
And currently on this property, it's this commercial building, correct? And then there are several residences in the back, is that correct?
1 for sure. There's 2 in the back. 2 mobile in the back, and then the property right next to it, which is Mr. Frazier's as well, and that is the single-family home that's on there.
And are they going to be able to meet for this specific use the parking requirements without impeding the driveway, or is there anything that?
So that'll be reviewed at development plan process. Just from an initial, me going out there taking a look in at, yes, he'll be able to, from a circulation standpoint, he'll be able to provide parking along the side, potentially around the rear, and then as it comes around the building, provide additional parking on the side and then exit out, almost like a horseshoe around the building.
Okay.
So, also, this is not in the historic district, so it does not have the same parking regulations as restaurants in the historic district. So he only has to meet 4 spaces per 1,000. So technically, he only needs to have 6 parking spaces out there.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I looked into that, just kind of like eyeballing it, and
Yeah.
that there's enough space for it to work.
I'm just, given the location of this, and if this becomes as popular as it could potentially be, I think that I could see parking, or in an area where we've already got some parking issues going on. Now, obviously, the Mellencamp improvements help a lot, but it's then banking on.
And also, if you think about it, and this is, I just pulled a 2021 aerial, you can see that there is additional overflow parking all along Goethe Road, literally right across the street. So even if even if all the parking spaces were full, there's still ample parking, public parking that was specifically created for all of the businesses to be able to use it.
And I understand that his intention is to continue this as a restaurant. One of the things that has been my hang up for this, and I honestly, I'm very sympathetic, and I actually want to see this happen. And I can see, I think you mentioned in the last meeting that since this is a commercial building that has been utilized in this capacity before, it lends itself to being kind of an exception to the rule as far as the spot zoning. And I'm sympathetic to that. One of the things, and I appreciate, by the way, that you reached out. It was Mr. Serrano? Is that what
Yes. Yep.
And I appreciate that you reached out to him and that got his blessing. Is he the property to the south?
To the north?
To the north?
Yeah, to
Okay.
the north.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the property to the south.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about it. It looks like there's nothing on it, but is that something that could be included in that same zoning, or they'd have to come in and?
I would say this, and that property has its own history as well. It's a vacant lot right now. It's wooded. That property had the same mixed-use 2 zoning when Mr. Frazier came through. So that property had previously received a mixed-use zoning, had a commercial designation, has since been, at the same time, had that rezoning to that residential general. My understanding is that, Mr. Frazier has talked to the sons or daughter, and at this point, they did not want to be a part of it, mainly for tax purposes. They didn't want their property values to then go up because they then had that commercial designation. In the future, if they so choose to move forward with a rezoning, we'll be right back here in front of you, pretty much provide the same timeline and a favorable recommendation. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to provide that 2006 aerial, and then just dealing with comp plan issues, that you can see the amount of growth that has happened in the 15 years since this aerial was taken. So
I just want to make sure to be clear, so that we don't set a precedent. To the west is all residential, and it shouldn't, we wouldn't think that anyone's going to change that to commercial because we have history on these specific lots.
Yes.
They're completely
yes,
different situation than any of the other parcels.
you are correct.
So in case, if the guy to the north wanted to do this, we could possibly say no because it's just residential and it's always been residential, whereas the people to the south have had a commercial, they've had this in and out situation. So I just
Yes.
wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yes.
One of and while I said, I understand that they want to turn this into a family restaurant. There are a few uses on here that come with neighborhood core that, should they decide, hypothetically, they're like, you know what, we don't want to do the residential, or we decide they want to sell it to somebody else. Car wash, while conditional, is still on there. An inn is on there. Social club, social center, and so these are, and being located right next to these other adjacent residential all around. It's good to hear that property to the south is vacant, because at least they're one less owner-occupied space that's impacted by changes on this property, other than their real property value is impacted by these changes. But some of these contractors' office, office, manufacturer storefront, manufacturing storehouse, these are higher intensity uses right next to all these residential behind it, and even if Mr. Serrano to the north has given his blessing, it still makes me nervous for those other adjacent properties, and I don't know if they have been, I mean, I assume they were notified of this rezoning, they've received letters.
Yep.
So they could have, at this point, looked it up and provided comment if they wanted.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
and no comment has been received from them?
No other comments beside Mr. Serrano.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I understand the concern. You refer to the intensity level, but you also have to realize that the properties have already been established out there. So, you have these smaller lots, and in order for development to happen, they have many regulations that have to be met, dealing with stormwater, parking requirements, buffer requirements. So all of these factors play in as
Narrow down the use.
Yeah, you're designing the site to a point where you can only have so much building on that site. And it depends on the use itself to where is it even going to be profitable for them to be there. So a lot of places or a lot of businesses are most likely not even going to look at some of these smaller lots because it's not economical for them to even develop a site.
I mean, he's sitting on over an acre. I mean, that's a lot of space to still be able to tuck in. I mean, the promenade with those commercial spaces those are fitting on some small areas.
Those are also a completely different situation and would
Completely
not
different,
work
do not
today.
those
in the
don't
real
meet
world.
the same regulations, and
They're
the promenade would not look like the promenade if it was to be designed today.
You're still sitting on over an acre. That leaves you a lot of opportunity, even with including stormwater and parking requirements, which are not as intense as being in the historic district. It's just, if I'm one of those adjacent property owners, it would cause me some discomfort with some of the options that are available. And like I said, I understand that this is his only option to be able to get this space. It's just it's just that this particular zoning opens up a can of worms, which is why I was so hopeful that maybe there's a process for him to be able to go back and apply for a variance of some kind. And
It's illegal. Can't do that.
But it's just like a rock and a hard place. I just think that.
Go back to that map just to kind of see lot layout so we can kind of compare the size of his lot to something else close by.
While you're going there, if I could, Kathleen, I used to have those same concerns until I really rested in the fact that now, and matter of fact, years ago, we didn't require staff to notify adjacent. Find out exactly what's going on. I know what you're saying, because there are some uses here that if, next owner do something with it, potentially. However, the people most impacted by it have not had any comments against it. That's where I kind of camp what's going on in conjunction with the historic use of this property. That's just where I sit. I don't know if it helps any or not. I used to do a lot of, well, what if, and this can be put here, and these neighbors may be upset about it, but they've been noticed, and they've been given an opportunity to ask questions, provide feedback, and there hasn't been any, other than the positive one to the north.
Correct. Yep.
And can you remind me of the time frame for which they received notice prior to these meetings?
30 days. So you're required to have notice out 30 days prior to. Mr. Frazier was required to do certified letters. So he has since provided all that information back to us. You have to do a certified receipt. So he has to both get that in prior to that 30-day mark, and then as individuals go, sign for it, because they have to sign for it on the form, and that's ripped off and given back to Mr. Frazier, and then that way they then have their letter stating exactly what was going on. Staff actually prepares a kind of like a template letter with all of the information, as well as a map showing the properties, so that way there's no confusion as to what it is. and tell them, like, we're going to have a public hearing on this date at this time. You're more than welcome to come in. And that's what Mr. Serrano, he got that letter, and he called and he said, hey, do I need to be there? I was like, you don't need to be here, but it's notifying you that the meeting's happening. He's like, oh, okay. Wish him all the best luck.
Are the
Great
potential,
person, so.
are the potential uses listed in that letter?
Well, it's not necessarily the uses are listed, but we list that it's going from a residential general to that neighborhood core zoning district.
So they would have to take the impetus to either phone call or go look up
Yes.
that information.
You can only provide so much information, and then you actually have to let the people
Use their own
do
homework.
their own work. Yes.
Do you have a survey or anything that shows what's the width of those lots? I'm just thinking, because they're not super wide, that, I'm just trying to give you a little bit of building information, like, they're not gonna be, I wouldn't assume, large footprints if anybody went in there, because we do have different setbacks and different, I'm sure there's vegetation, the whole parking situation, like, I can see multiple smaller scale things, but I don't know that I'd ever see anything large on a property that size.
1 second. I've got a copy of the old deed. So you're looking at a total of 216 feet in width.
That's both of them together.
Yes, that's both of them together, correct. But those are two separate properties. So 108,
Their own setbacks,
108 feet,
their own
yes.
regulations.
Yep. So, and what will have to happen is, since this is the commercial use as it moves forward, and during that development plan process, there is, existing vegetation on Mr. Frazier's property to the south. So he is required to provide that buffer. It's a landscape buffer, so existing vegetation can be used, and if there's any gaps, we'll make sure that those are filled in. But that's during
If I want to pop quiz you, do you know the side setbacks on something like that? It's not determined by building type there, because that's not historic district. So.
Correct. There is lot types.
Right.
So it is the large. I think it's the large. I'm sorry, that's for residential. So it has a commercial
Yeah, I just didn't know
designation,
what it was
but you're looking at probably 10 feet along the sides. Yeah. So I mean, you think about it. You take 10 feet off of either side. So there's 20 feet right there. And then as you start putting parking in, as you start putting any type of stormwater requirements for in the future, it really does start to narrow down the available space for any type of development.
Do we want to take a moment to read this comment, or maybe I'll just do that?
Well,
Relevant.
you can read it yourself, but it's a public comment, so the person is not here.
So it's not
So
read.
We don't
We
read them out loud.
If they're not here, they have to represent themselves.
That was only during COVID and we were on Zoom.
Well,
Okay.
as a little background for any commissioners that read it, this is a gentleman that owns
Has residential on either side of him as well.
Huh?
Has residential on either side of him.
I believe so, but it's a totally different zoning district.
Okay. A motion from anyone?
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to approve the request by J.C. Frazier Jr. for approval of an amendment to the Town of Bluffton official zoning map to rezone 2 parcels from residential general to neighborhood core. The subject parcels consist of approximately 1.24 acres in total and are identified by Beaufort County tax map numbers as stated on the screen.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. One no. Thank you.
And the reason I'm doing that, Mr. Frazier, just for the record, is because I just don't think the neighborhood core is the appropriate zoning for that specific location. But I am all the best to you in your restaurant, because I think that's awesome.
Any further discussion?
The last item that I have not on here, but, so we have a new employee, Carrie Guzman, who's here. She is our growth management coordinator, so you'll start seeing some correspondence from her.
Okay.
And if you have any questions or comments or anything, please direct them to her, not me. So I
Oh,
appreciate
yeah,
that.
okay.
Yes.
Welcome. Okay, I'll still copy you, Kevin, just to
Okay,
blow up your email.
sounds good. All right.
Okay,
That's all I had.
okay. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.